part of the journey of rehearsal is like going off the main highway, getting lost on the small roads. And if someone keeps saying, oh, turn left here. Oh, there's a sign coming up. You're going to veer into the left lane. And because then you're going to have to make quick right. Make sure you have your turn signal on. And I'm like, let me get off. Let me end up in a cornfield and I will find my way back. If I get really lost, bring me back. But let me get lost because I'm going to find more moments that will be my own. And I had to learn this as a director myself, is let them get a little lost. And David Cromer, what is beautiful about him is he's like, let's get it wrong. Let's not try to create a good picture. Let's just don't solve that moment, stay on the knife's edge. He allows you to show your worst self and not apologize for it, or not try to be winning, not try to get the audience over to your side. Just let that person have to wallow in their own stink. You need to have permission to fail.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Betsy Aidem is an actor. I sat down with her in her home in New York City to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character?
Read the play over and over and over again. Keep looking for clues that what other people say about your character, how your character is a different person with each character. I don't ever think that a character is one person. I am not one person. I have a different relationship with people who might not agree that I'm the same thing to them. So I think that that's a good way to approach playing a part. If I've played a lot of historical people, so I'm a research junkie, I get sometimes a little, I've gone down the rabbit hole looking for microfilm at the New York Public Library to find one picture in Life magazine in 1945 that my character opened an art gallery on La Cienega Boulevard. In a minor character in a play called Nikolai and the Others that David Cromer directed. When I played Lady Bird, I went to Austin, Texas. I met with archival librarians. They took me in her private libraries. I drove to the ranch because I wanted to see where she lived. There were about 6 people on the 6,000-acre ranch that I saw that day. It was empty, and it was beautiful along the Pedralbes River. And I walked through her closets and looked at the colors that she chose, and there was this one thing on her bed that was cross-stitched, and it was like, I wake and find a life of beauty. I sleep and dream and, oh God, what was it? Something about a life of duty. That, like, she wished for a life of beauty, but she ended up with a life of duty. And it was suddenly I went, oh, so she took something that she felt was a duty really deep into her DNA. And I listened to her voice over and over again. I went to the Wildflower Center. I stayed on Lady Bird Lake and watched the bats fly. So you just, and read, all the Carol books and stuff like that, and books, biographies of hers, and talked to people who knew her. It just, like, you can keep going. I did this with Marguerite Oswald. I played Lee Harvey Oswald's mother. So I deep dived into 800 pages of Norman Mailer, Jean Stafford, and then you look at pictures, and then you hear like a fragment of a voice or this or that. When you're making up a person, you're free because it's your imagination meeting what the writer came up with in the privacy of their home. And I went to Paris for Prayer for the French Republic. I just thought, I need to see the streets that she walked down. I went to the Holocaust Museum and saw the names of his family on the wall. I went to where his grandparents lived during the war. I went to the oldest synagogue in Paris. And then I just took pictures of women on the street, women that looked like professional women of the class and the thing. And, and then ultimately it's insight. Ultimately there's people that watching that funny amalgam of French women that's like incredibly polite and arrogant at the same time, and figuring out how that kind of intolerance is contained and then just completely explosive, which was really helpful to me. David Cromer, for that particular project was incredibly helpful and hard on me and wouldn't accept the first thing I came up with, or the 13th thing I came up with, the 26th, maybe like 27, you'd say that's it, and then the next day it wouldn't be it, and so you're constantly, you're just not done. You just keep, you'd have an epiphany, 2 years later after you'd already done the play, a bunch of performances, and like, why didn't this ever occur to me? But something floats in.
Yeah.
Something floats in because, it depends on your training.
So you have to be both an investigator, like you're saying, and then willing to live with the understanding that you are not going to find it.
I had somebody call me years ago. I think it was Marin Hinkle was about to do Miss Julie, and I had done it in like 1990 in Portland, Maine, and I never felt like I solved it. I just always felt like I was reaching for it, and I'd had years in acting classes where I just thought I was never going to get to do any kind of classical plays because I hadn't gone to Juilliard or Yale or NYU. My parents would refuse to send me to grad school for acting. They were like, do something practical, we'll send you. So I was really like, watch me, I'll do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to prove that I can do this without all that. So I worked really hard. I kept taking acting classes, even on my nights off when I was doing 8 shows a week. I went back twice mid-career to work on my voice to get it into a place that was more resonant and more able to contain the depth of rage or distress or pure abandon that I wanted it to have. So yeah, I think you have to keep searching. It's not done. So I said, she calls me and asks me about it. I said, the best thing I can tell you is don't assume you'll solve it.
Yeah.
It's the searching that's the thing that keeps you vital and alive and throbbing sort of with this active energy, is that you don't think you have it in the bag.
Yeah. But isn't that what we want also as an audience? Like if you like that energy of not solving is what we want.
That's
if you
how
solved
the audience exactly.
Yeah.
That is how the audience enters into your most empathy that an audience can feel is when they feel that you don't know what to do. And that's like your golden moment when your character is unsure. Everybody knows what that's like. They can admire you for having all the answers, but when you don't have the answer and they can see you struggling, and the duality of that, I think, is what allows people to go, oh, I know that. I get that too. I feel that.
Yeah.
I think that's really the most human part of acting is the moment in between when you don't know what to do.
Yes.
And how do you make decisions, and that you have to hold two things at once, in big decisions when you're doing life, when you're doing acting, it's the same thing. It's like, how do you weigh things out? I mean, we all make lists, column A and column B. And I think, why should characters have all the answers just because it's written?
So it sounds like really early on you had the acting bug, and you had to fight against the push towards something more legitimate from people with good intentions.
Yes, I think I auditioned to be a fairy in Midsummer Night's Dream in high school. I think I was a freshman in high school. My best friend, Sharon, who's no longer with us, she ended up playing Mustard Seed. I was Cobweb. And for some reason, it was an all-school event. The band played and the dancers danced, and it was on the roof of the gymnasium. And there was sort of like a Renaissance fair going on. And we were doing this play, and I thought, this is magic. This is like, the greatest acid trip ever. Everybody's involved, and you just get to meet all these people, and it's social, and it's make-believe. So that did it. I mean, I was pretty young for that to happen. And I went to college for art history and really did not have a strong first year of college. I was really unstable and out of my league academically, didn't have the theater department I was looking for. So I took a leave of absence, much to my parents' chagrin, but they found a program in New York because my dad had known somebody growing up in Chicago, Paul Libben, who ran Circle in the Square, and asked him if he knew of any summer, camp for people who are 18 years old. And Circle in the Square was where I started. So I came that summer, and Terry Hayden was one of the teachers who had been a big actor studio person. And, Lee Strasberg was still alive. Stella Adler was still alive. Bobby Lewis. I mean, there were all these, Sanford Meisner, there were all these acting gurus, Paul Mann, the bad ones that made people take their clothes off. You know, there were so many different schools of acting at that time that were all like, we're the best, no, we're the best. And so there was this competitive thing. But something I liked about Circle was that we were all the mutts. And that fall, I transferred to NYU in the 70s. If you had a needle sticking out of one arm and a check in the other hand, they'd have accepted you at NYU. Sorry, it's my alma mater, and I've taught there. I've been alumni there, and I learned a lot from teaching there too in the experimental theater wing. But Nikos Sakharopoulos, who ran Williamstown, was one of my teachers, so he asked if I would come up to be an apprentice, and my parents were, hell no, we are not paying for you to do like slave labor. I was like, what? Oh, okay. And they're like, you're going to work in a mall for minimum wage and get, learn some money for the summer. And so the following summer they offered me $50 a week, and I ended up going there and doing plays. And it was very guerrilla. There were people who were hired to do the leads. I was always playing the small parts in Hanging Lights. Yeah. Me and Amanda Plummer were Hanging Lights. And then somebody saw me in something there. I went back 3 summers at that moment in my career. Somebody saw me and gave me my first off-Broadway job at the WPA Theater, where I ended up doing 4 plays. And I came on stage for 15 minutes, but it was like, I was so excited for those 15 minutes, and I wore a red sequin dress, and I just thought I landed in New York. So, but then I kept studying with Terry and Nikos a bit, and then I found another teacher in about 1983, Zena Jasper, who passed about a year ago, who really was a champion of mine and told me that some of my early training, which was all like the method, the Strasberg more than the Stella, a lot of sense memory and work like that. And when you're young, when you're 18 years old and you're excavating childhood memories, because you're still really a child, but you're going into this, you're tuning up your sensory equipment, which is a really good part of your toolbox. But sometimes some of the teachers go into sort of dangerous psychological territory, and people can get really waylaid by that work. And then what happens is it was not fused with script work, which is sort of, Sella's thing was script interpretation. So Zena was really the person who kind of married those two things for me, because I started realizing that I was really verbally kind of dexterous in moving like mountains of language, and that I should do that. But there was always this hiccup with my emotional life. And so it took me a long time to not ride that. I mean, even when I was working on Prayer, which is quite recently, David talked to me about something that happened with my voice when I get emotional, and it goes up a register, and Zena would tell me that too. I would hear this, and I said, I know, it sounds like I'm asking for something, and I don't want to be caught asking for something. So he's like, I don't need the tears. I don't need you to go there. Just find a way to do it and keep the line moving forward. The what you need to say is more important than what you're feeling. The feelings can happen in spite of that. And so
was that freeing, or was that another burden?
It was both, because I was sort of in the moment like distressed that I was still having an issue that had always sort of followed me. And as much as I tried to like work through it, that it was coming back because I was feeling vulnerable, and habits die hard. So I was grateful that he brought it up. I was also like enraged that I had to like still work through this, and all that stuff is fuel. I was working with Brian Murtis. We did those Chekhov plays at Lake Lucille, and there was a point when we were doing Ivanov, and my character, I think it was Anna Petrovna, had to really like beg her husband not to leave that night. And there was a point when Brian came up to me and he says, "It's time to crack your heart open. Like, don't cheat around this. Don't approximate this. Like, go right to it. Go to it. Don't trick it up. Don't do anything." He didn't use that much language. He just said, don't. he just said, it's time to crack your heart open.
Yeah.
That was it. And I once was on a film set where Michael Apted, we were shooting a pilot, and I was the widow of a fireman, and there were 200 extras and bagpipes, and we were at Forest Lawn, and there was all this film equipment. And he comes up and he goes, we're on a really long lens, so I'm right up in on you, and just, I want the whole thing, all right? And then he just walks away. And I was like, well, that's empowering, kind of, because he's not going to over-explain it. He just wants me to lose my shit. And I lost my shit. But it was, if he had talked it through too much, sometimes just one phrase that a director will give you will be, sure enough to, but unlock the thing.
But in this case, don't you think, though, that's also really terrible for a director to just come up to you and say that, right?
Oh, well, you could say, that's so results-oriented. Why would he do that? I guess it's to the point, is your point, and therefore it could have been worse, is what you're saying. No, it could have been worse. It's up to you in the moment to decide if something is a criticism or if it's a permission.
Oh, I love that.
And I feel like you have to have the confidence in your instrument and your abilities and the homework you've done to take something that somebody says to you and not let it fuck up your head, get a noise, create this static that's working against you. That, because everybody's in the moment. I feel much more pressure on a film set. In rehearsal, I feel wildly free. And in performance, I usually feel wildly free. But on a film set, because I have less experience doing that, it's funny, I'm going for a fitting for a TV gig that I have next week, and it's a really tricky scene. And I'm like, oh God, I hope, I know what I'm doing. They chose me, they must think I do, but, I always wonder, there are other people who that's their comfort zone. They know, the second on the set, and you can see it, You can see these beautiful actors who just, the camera is the window into their soul. I always feel like that on a stage, that large frame of me moving in space is my playground.
Yeah.
So,
and were you always like that, even when you were young? The stage was your home, or were you always thinking, okay, eventually I'll get to LA or something like everybody?
I never had a plan. I never had a plan to go to LA. I didn't like the times that I would go there before I had representation. I didn't have an agent for the first 5 years I got out of school. I came out of school in 1979, and I started typing, at the Epilepsy Institute, doing dictaphone. I'd go to auditions from backstage. That was a way you'd find out. Somebody who'd seen you in something would call you, and a friend would ask you to do something for no money. I did this that summer I got out of school. A production of Marat Sade was for no money, and a bunch of us were rehearsing, and we were rehearsing in the basement of the Anvil, which was one of the S&M bars at that time. That was, it was just pre-AIDS down in the West Village, and it was sticky and dark and, little. And there was a man who was in the cast who was at one point during rehearsal was pleasuring himself in the middle of rehearsal. And we came to a break and we were like, what's going on? What's going on? The director said, well, I decided to hire some outpatients from Bellevue because I thought it'd take place in an asylum. And I was so excited that I was getting to sing in Marat Sade and I learned the song. But I was like, nah, there's something, I gotta walk. And I rarely walk. I've had some bad experiences where it's time to walk, but I just sort of am a stick it out, and that was one of the ones I didn't. But,
I smell a memoir here.
Oh, no, it's so funny because my boyfriend keeps saying to me, you need to write a memoir. I started actually working on one when I was backstage at Leopoldstadt last year because I had an hour that I wasn't on stage, that I was playing with the 10-year-old kids and having fun, and we were beading and coloring and painting and doing different projects. But then I just started writing, and somehow somebody had said, how many plays have you done? And I got to about 82.
Wow.
So I just never had that plan to go to LA. When I would go out there with a boyfriend or my husband or this or that, I would get feedback she's a really good actress, but we're looking for someone attractive. The message I got from LA was that I was not attractive. And I'd come back to New York and I would get to play sexy, hot parts or character parts or whatever came my way. So I just put that out of my mind. And I loved doing plays. And I knew it wasn't financially a really good plan, but it gave me the most joy. And then I'd go to regional theater and I'd get to be in a town that I didn't know.
Yeah.
When I was 30, I went to Europe for a 19-city tour of 1,000 Airplanes on the Roof. I got to see like some great cities in Europe playing in front of 2,000 people a night. You know, the play was a 90-minute monologue set to a Philip Glass score. I learned it before I started rehearsal, and that was an approach that I figured out pretty early on and have kept to. And I know Dee Dee O'Connell also does this. You know, you don't want to be the old person in the room who doesn't know their lines. I had been a young person watching older people do that and thinking, how long are we going to have to wait? And I always learned quickly and then would become impatient. So I thought, don't make anyone else feel impatient. And it's not a quality I admire in myself.
Yeah.
So I try to learn it so I know it, so then I'm free. Because the form sets you free. I mean, as long as you know that. And it doesn't get me stuck, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think it gets me stuck. So
it's working, right? It's one of those things like, if it's working, don't mess with it. Are there things that you have discovered about your approach that you have discovered are no longer useful to you now? Or have discovered that worrying about this aspect is actually not necessary anymore? And that has freed you up. You know what I mean? It could be something that you maybe for the first part of your career, you thought, oh, this is a very important aspect of this that in some production you weren't able to do. And you're like, oh, that worked without that. Why was I chained to that for so long?
The hardest thing is when you have an idea in your head of when you read the play and you're working on it in preparation and you have an idea of like what the house looks like and who your husband looks, and then you know, and this happens somewhere on sets, and you walk in and it's nothing like you imagined it, and you have to really be fluid with like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. Oh, I'm not going to be like making a tuna casserole while this scene is going on. Like, you know, you come up with all this backstory and stuff you're going to do. I had an idea today and I was thinking, gee, should I seek out the scenic designer and see if like the production designer, if they like would want to have this on the set? Because I think it reminds me of something that is where I think this character lives. But I thought, you know, don't get too many ideas in your head about what you think it should be. I would do that, and then I'd be like fighting against the picture I had in my head. So I try to do that less. I mean, with Prayer, we did it with one cast 2 years ago at City Center. And this has happened with other plays, that you remount and the people change and you're not going to get the same thing. Yeah. I had you know, when we moved from off Broadway, which I loved my family. I loved them. It was a beautiful cast. But we moved to Broadway and they replaced seven, I guess it was like they kept all 4 women and they replaced 6 of the men. And so I had a new father, a new husband, a new son, and a new brother. So I basically couldn't. Yeah. I mean, I was this, even though Marcel was very clear to me, it started shifting because like Neil Nasser, this beautiful actor from Boston who played my husband, he had this way of making me feel that he wasn't adversarial with me, that he could fight with me with like tremendous amount of love, that he would have my back, that if we chose the most difficult thing, which was to leave Paris and move to Israel, that we were going to be a unit. That hadn't occurred to me, you know, the first time round. There were things that I felt like that one of my sons was more fragile, and if he was sturdier, what does that do to me? Yeah. You know, so you have to like use with what's right in front of you,
and it changes your performance. It changes what you do.
Totally. It gives you so much more to work with. Like not just atmospherically, not just the dynamic of behavior, the history that it suddenly tells you how these people came together, what their love life is like, what they do when they walk down the street. Do they talk to each other? Do they listen when they're at a restaurant? How much do they both want to escape their children? There's all these things that you come up with based on the person you're doing it with. And you can make all those choices in your living room. There's a lot of work that goes on in people's living rooms, but it's got to be happening with the people on the stage. I mean, I think. The play, you mentioned Michael Countryman, we were doing this play called Mary Rose, and it's about a couple who takes their daughter to Scotland, and she's in her teens, and she's meeting this person who will become her fiance, and they're in the Hebrides, and the plot of the play is that she goes missing. And they stay a month looking for her all over the Hebrides, and they never find her. And the second act of the play is 25 years later, and they're much older. Paul Huntley did these beautiful wigs, and they, the costumes sort of changed, and we were, the grief of losing a child is only something I've witnessed with dear friends, and it's unimaginable kind of loss. And there was a moment when Tina Landau asked me to go to the window to close the curtains. I think I talked about this with somebody else, but it was just such a meaningful moment. And every time I close the curtains at night, I think about her being alone at night on an island where we couldn't find her. And the shudder it would give me of closing the curtains, even 25 years later, and then she comes through the door exactly as she was, 25 years ago. It's such a spooky play.
Yeah.
But, every now and then these alchemical moments come to you because you have to combine not just your own experiences, but your imagination, your research, your ideas about what, I love, art history was my first love. So I look at paintings a lot. I get a lot of ideas. I try to paint. I draw portraits of people. I try to figure out what the human face is in planes and relationships. It's, I took so many drawing classes. I still can't really, master that. But the attempt is all, you know?
Yeah.
What was that line of Tennessee Williams in Camino Real? Make voyages, attempt them. There's nothing else, that it's in the trying, not in the, look at me, I got that.
Right.
It's like, I don't think that serves you.
In that same vein, can you tell us a time where you felt like you couldn't wrap your arms around a role that you had to do, or that you were having trouble with, and that you weren't getting help from the director? And what happened, and what did you learn from that?
I think Zena really prepared me for saying, you need to learn how to direct yourself. So if you don't have help from your director, you can do the work. Your job is to come in with as many ideas as possible. It's a collaboration. Sometimes you're going to get help back. Most of the time you're not. So you need to really come in with as many things in your paint box as you can. And you might hit a frustration, and you might blame the other person, but it's you still have to solve it, because you're the one who has to get up in front of them, 88 people or 2,000 people. So I remember when we were doing A Lie of the Mind, and I didn't have a rehearsal period. I literally auditioned to be an understudy. 4 days later, I took over the part. I did that with Steel Magnolias. I had 8 days. I've done a lot of things where I've just jumped in. That was really great to feel like you were being, audacious and, brash. I hate to use the word courage, because a lot of people lately have been using the word courage about acting, and I feel like courage is the people who are defending our country, the people who are in the line of fire all over the world. That's courage. I think what we have is abandon and a sort of shamelessness and stamina. And so I was, I had to do this story, and this happens with me a lot. I'm doing a play that's 3 hours long, and my heaviest lifting is in the last hour emotionally. And you're tired, the audience is tired. And Lie of the Mind, I had to do that whole story about Sally had to tell the story of how her brother and father got into this death-defying race drunk in Mexico, and how the father had died. And somebody put me in. I had a put-in rehearsal, and the rest of it was up to me to solve, And I did, it's funny because I crashed that audition. I used to be a big audition crasher, and Sam Shepard happened to open the door, and I said, I heard you lost someone, I'm here. Do you want to see me read this part? And he said, yeah. I didn't get that job that day. I got the job like 3 or 4 months later. And I was part of the replacement cast with David Strathairn and Dee O'Connell, and it was like a wonderful, like long, beautiful run. But I didn't have.
So wait. About audition crashing, you would just find out where audition, like, you knew what it was, or that it was something. Because back in you're talking about the dark ages where nothing's online or anything.
Oh, nothing was online. You didn't even have a cell phone.
Yeah.
You had sometimes an answering service. The answering machines had just been invented. So you literally, you would hear about something. How would you
hear about,
okay. So for example, I saw True West with John Malkovich and Gary Sinise. I was like, this is like exactly the kind of theater that I've been waiting for. I'm so excited. Then I heard, because I was in a lab at Circle Repertory Theater. They put me in this thing called the lab, which was sort of like the junior, company to the main company that was full of stars and people like that. So we would do little workshops and readings, and every now and then they'd ask you to do a reading with the company. And I heard that John was doing this play called Balm in Gilead by Lamford Wilson. So I was like, I want to audition for that. And they said, only company people. And I somehow found out that there were 2 days, because John was rehearsing Death of a Salesman, that they were seeing people. And I'd gone to see Tito Puente beforehand, and I was in a very percussive mood. And they said, and I remember Tanya Bearson came out and said, John's really tired. I think, you shouldn't expect anything. I said, give me 5 minutes in the room. So I literally went in there, and I was so angry that they acted like they were doing me a favor. I kicked the chair that they expected me to sit in. I was ranting around the room, and John just said, well, thanks for waking me up. And about a month or 2 later, I got a call that Trish Hawkins, who had been cast as in the role of Kay, was going to the Guthrie to do Three Sisters. Would I want to play the role of Kay? Because John had put me on a list. If anyone drops out from the Circle Rep Company, it was a co-pro with Steppenwolf Company, and then there were like 6 months. I want this crazy girl, Betsy Aidem. So, that, and then I crashed one for the Seagull that I didn't get for Des McAnuff, and it had already been cast with Phoebe Cates. And, but then there's a point when you start becoming a known entity that crashing looks like you're a little desperate. But I had nothing to lose. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't have an agent. I was just like, I made my opportunity. So I tell my students, go see the work that turns you on. Figure out what excites you, and find a way to put yourself in the path of those people so you can work with them.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. But it takes audacity. Where'd you get that from?
That was probably both my blessing and my curse. Because part of it was, I had a fair amount of disapproval, even though my parents, I know, ultimately became very proud that I stuck with it in spite of their disapproval. I really felt like I had to prove something, and that is not a good energy to go forward in any pursuit of the arts. But it was part of climbing the ambition ladder. That kind of audacity was like, they can't throw me in the garbage can like a piece of paper. I am physically in the room. They have to look me in the eye and say no to me. And it wasn't like stalking, and it wasn't desperate. It was just like, hi, I'm ready. Would you see me? Yeah. It was very straightforward on my part. It was like, give me an opportunity. And, it doesn't work that way for film and television. It's like, oh, I heard something I didn't get. And there's so many things I don't get. I'm driven as much by the things I don't get as the things I do. I've worked with many of my directors multiple times because they know that I'm going to, show up with the, that I'm going to deliver. But the ones who haven't cast me, that gives me fuel to like, I got to keep going. Don't take it. I used to take these things so, deeply. The rejection is part of it. But I heard last week this expression, oh, we're pivoting creatively with that part. They used to say, oh, we're going in a different direction. I'd be like, Northeast? I know how to get Northeast, But they don't, they don't tell you anything. And now that everything's on Zoom, it's just a guessing game.
Yeah. So the advice to direct yourself is good advice, but obviously a good director is like gold. Give me the characteristics that work best for you, for a director?
You know, for me, I love it when somebody lets me get all the way through a scene and then gives me some adjustments, and then we try that and do like the filter that he or she is provided for me to kind of like re-examine the moments through a different prism. That works really well for me. Getting stopped and started and micromanaged like gets the hair on my neck standing up, because I feel like, and I've had to say this to directors, you know, if you want to do all my thinking for me, I'll stop thinking. But I thought you hired me because you like the way I think. Do you want me to stop thinking? I think J. Smith Cameron had told me that years ago. And also, like, you know, part of the journey of rehearsal is like going off the main highway, getting lost on the small roads. And if someone keeps saying, oh, turn left here. Oh, there's a sign coming up. You know, you're going to veer into the left lane. And because then you're going to have to make quick right. Make sure you have your turn signal on. And I'm like, let me get off. Let me end up in a cornfield. And I will find my way back. If I get really lost, bring me back. But let me get lost, because I'm going to find more moments that will be my own. And I had to learn this as a director myself, is let them get a little lost. And David Cromer, what is beautiful about him is he's like, let's get it wrong. Let's not try to create a good picture. Let's just don't solve that moment. You know, stay on the knife's edge. He allows you to show your worst self and not apologize for it, or not try to be winning, not try to get the audience over to your side. You know, just let that person have to wallow in their own stink. You know, you need to have permission to fail. And I think the best directors allow you to have a little room, because they trust themselves to know that you're going to give them all these different choices to pick from, and they'll go, okay, we'll take that, we'll take that, we'll take that, we'll take that. If you don't give the actor time to make those discoveries, the choices they make will always be imposed. And so you're always sort of trying to reach something that somebody told you rather than something you found organically. And it's very hard, because you have to be a patient person. Daniel Auken also, I just did a couple workshops with him, and he's very patient. He just like watches, and hearing a little bit of laughter every now and then is always like great. You go, okay, I'm on the right path, here. But he watches, and he'll only say like a couple of things, because he trusts the fact that he's chosen you in the first place. And I think it's amazing when somebody opens something up in you that hadn't occurred to you. I mean, that's like, just what you dream of. And you go, yes. But being micromanaged does not really work.
So,
for me.
Do you believe, like I believe, that if you got to a place with a certain moment by yourself, and that place looks almost exactly like the place in an alternate universe where you would have gotten to if a director told you exactly how to do it, that there's a very big difference between those two mystically, because it came from you. And what is that?
That is sometimes this alchemical thing that happens, that your past floats into you. I had to do this phone call in prayer where I was talking about my father. And my own father died 28 years ago. And he was with me a lot through that show. So when I would be talking about Marcel's father, and I would see my own father, and I would see him do something that I hadn't remembered. I would, like once you start doing this unconscious stuff floats up to you if you're open and you're relaxed and you have the sensory capacity to be floating two different things at the same time. You're floating a script, you're also floating your own history. You're floating what you wished your history had been, the things you wished you'd said that you didn't say. I mean, there's all this meta stuff happening at the same time. And then you hit an emotional thing, and your sense of shame or loss or regret or pure childlike need just escapes you because you've opened all these different channels. So it's like, when you watch those movies about space and you see them turning all the dials and everything's about to take off, it's like that. You're just turning all the dials open so this whole ship can like take off through you. It's like a seance, So
you're saying that all the knobs wouldn't necessarily be turned if you were micromanaged to that place. There's something that you're allowing to be open when it comes from you and is just slightly directed towards something.
Yeah, but
right?
you know what? Honestly, I am old enough and I've been doing this long enough and I've been in enough rehearsal rooms that like I can take that information of what they expect and I can convert it into my own thing. Yeah. And as long as the result, they don't know, like sometimes they don't know. I mean,
but that process has to happen.
Yeah.
You have to do what you just said there.
Both. But you don't need to let the person know what they don't know.
Right.
And that took me years to learn. I always felt like I had to let them know.
That's wasted energy there.
It's such a waste of energy. And, it's enough to know what you know. You don't need to let them know what they don't know. You just don't. You can just go, okay, and go on. I used to, try to win the point. That is
yes.
The biggest
I
waste
to
of
that.
time. If I could get back those hours that I've wasted trying to be right or win a point, I mean, in any part of my life, it's just useless.
I know what you mean.
I mean, this whole hoopla post, this Tony thing. It's like I already won. I got to play the part.
Yeah.
I got to do the play.
Yeah.
This idea that a gun's going to go off and we're going to race to some imaginary finish line and somebody's going to get a trophy is just, it's like, I can't kind of integrate it. It seems bizarre to me because everybody is doing their own story and their own path. But, it's set up to refer to people as victors, and they're not. Right. I mean, your victory is in the work. To me, I mean, I'm an old school, old time. Never had a lot of fame. Never had a lot of fanfare. Yeah. This is about as big as it's ever gotten, and I'm 66 and a half. So I would really hope that young people who are listening to this and to your podcast would say, "Oh, you'd like to get there sooner, but the slow and steady thing enriches you as an artist almost more because you don't settle on a quality that everybody's decided you have, and then you don't know where to go. Because I think what happens if you get discovered when you're young, which everybody wanted. I mean, we all wanted like the chasing after the big whatever it was, and I didn't really. I kept thinking, no, I want to be a theater actor. But still, you wanted people to pay attention. You were hoping that it'd lead to the next thing so you could get more employment. Mm-hmm. But if you got told that you were something early on, then you keep repeating that. And it's very hard to keep pushing it against. As soon as I play one part, I get offered 5 of those parts. Mm-hmm. And it happens. Fortunately, I've had a lot of variety, so people can't quite pin me down. But and that was part of the problem for me. In terms of film and television, I never had one quality. Mm-hmm. And I also maybe think that some of it is just being at home with that lens. The planes of your face adjacent to the lens of a camera are different for certain people than they are in real life. Your ability to open your soul when there are 50 people breathing around you. I always look at Jessica Lange and Cape Fear in that. I mean, she's fantastic in everything, but that scene that they shot in the bottom of the boat when Robert De Niro is about to try to rape her daughter, and she's saying, take me, don't, and she's hysterical. And because it was a small set that they probably had to do it for 4 or 5 days and put herself through that over and over again. And it was so believably like kill me first. I could not get over it. I couldn't get over it. The things I admire that I watch people, I ran into Judith Ivey the other day and I remembered her from A Fair Country. I don't even know if she remembered this moment, but I said, I remember you were keeping your voice really calm, but you had this glass that had ice in it and you were having a drink and you just kept grinding it into the the table beside you. And all your rage was in that one twist, that continued twist of your wrist while your voice stayed calm. And I just think how you have a tell sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Did she appreciate you caught
I
that?
think so. Listen, I think people are always grateful to have a moment of creativity remembered.
Yeah.
I remember things I saw the summer I came to New York, the plays that I saw. I have a exceptionally freaky memory.
Yeah.
And I think that remembering moments that people create on stage that are somehow revelatory to the character that they're playing or to me, because it informs something that I haven't solved in my own life. Those stay with me. Those are like real seeds of things I've experienced.
Yes.
So
I have to now tell you my appreciation of you that you'll never guess in a million years. You may not even remember doing it.
What is it?
It's called The Show About the Show.
Oh my God! I never even saw it.
Well, I helped make that show. And that day was the only day that I wasn't on the set of all the first season. So it now has, I think he's working on the third or fourth season.
Oh my gosh.
Of this very strange independent web series, I guess it would be called, that has a pretty large fan base. But your scene is my favorite scene of the entire show.
I don't even remember what it was. You're right. I don't remember.
Okay, so you play a school administrator who is reprimanding him. He's a teacher,
Right.
and he reenacted this moment from his real life where he was smoking weed with his students and was called before the board, dean, and you play another administrator, I guess. So I didn't know your work 10 years ago. I didn't know. So here you are on this thing, and I didn't know who you were at all. But but this is how I trust myself, because I knew that you were amazing. First of all, you're so amazing in the scene, but I'm like, who is this woman? She has such amazing choices every second.
God, I don't even remember this.
I will send you the scene.
We had like no preparation. We just were thrown in and did it. And I had done a scene. I had done a scene similarly with Meryl Streep on a movie called, oh God, the working title was 50 Violins. Music of the Heart was the name of it. Where I was an administrator and she was doing something on what I thought was untoward to the students. And we had an improv. Wes Craven, of all people, was directing it. And we did an improv where I just lit into her. And,
did it make the movie?
And then we ramped into the scene. And the improv was so much better writing on our parts, I thought, than the scene itself. And so when we finished and he called cut, Meryl looked at me and she was like, oh, we got a live one here. I'm like, yeah. So I kind of had familiarity with that territory, but I have never watched it. You know, I really try not to watch myself, because all I see is the flaws. Certainly at my age, I see time marching across my face. I want to keep it that way because that's why I keep getting hired, because I look like a person.
But I'm telling you, this is flawless.
I can't believe it. I've never seen it, so I don't even know.
So I guess what I'm
that means I must have been in the moment.
In the moment, I guess.
Because I have no recollection of it, so I was so in the moment that I don't. And frequently when I look back on plays that I've done, I remember everything about the other actors around me and what they were doing. And I know people who remember what they did. I frequently don't always remember what I did. I remember everyone around me, because that's the idea. You're supposed to be like in the room with the people. Yeah. So I try not to hold on. My dad used to always say to me, don't look back, look forward, keep moving, keep moving. And yet all that stuff is fuel. So what are you going to do?
But since I started this show, I've been saying to myself, I have to try and find Betsy to get her on. From that, and then slowly, over the past 10 years, I'm realizing you're in all these other things and you have a theater career. Didn't even know.
Oh my God.
And then I'm like, oh my God. See, then it felt like this is just what I needed for my ego. Because I was like, I discovered her.
Oh, she was That is part of the beauty of being kind of anonymous for so many years, is that people come to see you in things because they don't know who you are. You're not famous. You're not defined by these great parts you did or were anointed for. It allows people to enter into whoever you are at that moment in a complete way, because they don't have any backstory about you whatsoever. They're not measuring you against 6 other performances you've done, or he's doing that again, or she's doing that again. I mean, it's a gift, and it's also like, wow, it'd be nice to not worry about my health insurance. I don't have, I guess, the ego or the skill set to insist, and I do think it is an insistence, that the camera come to me, and it's a certain kind of confidence that I see people, that they are just, they pull everything into them. I'm not equipped with that thing. My thing is, how do I serve the story and everybody around me? So I will disappear. Yes. There are people who insist on, like, everything I'm feeling is the center of the universe. Maybe they're not thinking that. I always think that the center of the universe is somewhere else in the room, and I have to, like, manage my own feelings, as opposed to insisting. It's a technique, maybe. I don't know. I really haven't figured it out.
But here's the thing, though. This is your first starring role on Broadway, right? Yeah. And now you got a Tony nomination, right? So that means that there's going to be, you have to figure that part out now, because the starring roles now start now.
Really? Oh God, I hope you're right. I just feel like I'm gonna, like, I've been offered a tiny part of like an independent film that I'll probably get paid 2 cents for, and a play like way downtown off Broadway. And I'm like, okay, I'll go back to what I was doing. Like, I don't know if it means, I don't think that there's a linear path to a career. It's a lot of, like, up, down, sideways, back 2 steps, this and that. When I was in Europe doing 1,000 Airplanes, and I was in front of 3,000 people in Milan, in the Palace Struzzi, the basketball stadium, they cordoned off 3,000 seats, and I was sitting backstage facing 12,000 seats. And I remember thinking, you should never be scared again. This is, like, really the most, like, unbelievable amount of people you're ever going to be in front of. And then I get in front of 88 people in Lexington, Kentucky doing a play, or, on 42nd Street doing something in some small theater, and I'm nervous as shit. And I'm thinking, why don't it, so I would love it if that were true, and people were, spilling over themselves to give me things, and I'd love to play leads. Listen, I just want good parts. I want to work with good directors. I want to be able to keep finding corners of humanity that are not represented that I can play. I think that's the goal, to keep doing this. Not, I don't want to keep repeating myself. The thing I'm about to go for fitting for is 190,000 degrees away from what I just did. Yeah. It's a completely economically, politically, personally, like, completely different person. So I'm, like, thrilled. Nothing makes me happier. When I was doing Still Magnolias for, like, 11 months, I was playing the Southern Belle and wearing pink, and I loved my company. Everybody was great. We still get together for lunch. I got this play, Road, that was a British play about these people living in Lancashire, and that were, like, on the dole and just, like, gritty and angry. And it was, like, so completely different. I was like, yes, give me the thing that's going to stretch me, hopefully. But, there is a machine of commerce that revolves around Broadway. Yeah. And I never thought I was going to be able to participate in it, because that machine is fed by celebrity, and it's fed by ticket sales and all that stuff. And every now and then something, because it's true and it's great. You look at Stereophonic this season, we were sold out. Prayer for the French Republic, both runs. I think that you can't do this alone. It's not a solo. It's not a solo act. So it takes a village to make one person stand out. Yeah. And sometimes that person stands out because the vehicle is set up that way, or because they're on the poster and they've just come off of a big TV thing. I mean, when I did All the Way with Bryan Cranston, he was just coming off Breaking Bad. And he was at the height of, he was on the cover of every magazine, he was on every talk show, he was doing everything. He had been a grunt like, actor in the background, kind of working his way up, working hard. And then his thing exploded. But because he had all those years of working hard, he treated everybody, it was an egalitarian way of treating everyone. And I think that was a beautiful thing to see, because it's like, you still have to do the work. That doesn't take care of you. It gives you access to things. And if this gives me any access, great. If it goes back to like the way it was and I'm like trying to compete, I mean, I'm still auditioning for things and they don't pick me. They're pivoting creatively and I'm like, where did they go? Who got that? Like, what wasn't good enough about what I did? You do wonder that. And then you go, listen, it's not meant to be. I was like, one of the biggest jobs I didn't get. And I saw Annabelle Gurwitch do this beautiful comedy thing the other night. And we were both tested with Gary Oldman for Sid and Nancy. I was like determined to play Nancy Spungen. We tested in the hotel.
Whoa.
Yes.
Chelsea Hotel?
Yeah.
You tested in the Chelsea Hotel?
And the Chelsea Hotel, Alex Cox, who was directing it, had us like rolling around on top of each other. I think I was bleeding and bruised for a week after that thing. Gary Oldman was like sobbing on top of me. Like, I got up off the floor. I was filthy. I was like sweaty. It was like wet. It was gross. And I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. I remember thinking this can happen. I ended up getting a play. And the play happened to be with this guy who ended up being the father of my son.
See that?
So like the word beshert, do you feel?
Yes.
I really believe you get the things you're meant to get.
Yes.
And the things you don't get are like, they're opening up something it wasn't meant to happen.
Yeah.
It's very hard to accept that when you're young, because you're just like, you think, why do they want me? It's like, somebody like ghosting you or breaking up with you. That's what auditioning's like. Somebody's constantly breaking up with you or ghosting you. And you're just like, I don't get it. I thought we had a good time. I don't understand. And so, you have to keep yourself vulnerable and also develop a very tough, hard skin to get through it. And it requires both, because you can't keep doing the work and not be able to unpeel and crack your heart open.
Yes.
Betsy Aidem, thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.